Now, protesters are gathered in Ferguson, Missouri after a local official there declared a state of emergency. Demonstrators have been marking the one-year anniversary of the shooting death of Michael Brown, an unarmed African-American teenager shot by a white police officer. Police say protesters were throwing frozen water bottles at them and warned the crowd of possible arrests.
Yeah, it's been 1 year since Michael Brown was killed, but the situation there is clearly still tense. Earlier, about 200 protesters marched from a church to the federal courthouse in St. Louis. Police arrested 56 protesters there. Now, the anniversary observance of Brown's death began peacefully, very calm, very peacefully on Sunday, but then turned chaotic later on into the night when shots were fired. Listen.
A frightening moment for so many people. You see some folks there ducking down. Police say an 18-year-old was critically wounded in an exchange of gunfire here. Tyrone Harris faces a number of charges, including assault on law enforcement. Ryan Young joins us now from Ferguson, Missouri, to bring us the latest information. Ryan, there is a long way to go in healing the racial divide in the United States, but with Ferguson as an example, how are things going?
Well, that's a tough question right there, because obviously there's a lot going on just under the surface, and we saw that kind of bubble up just last night. A lot of people here are saying the violence that happened had nothing to do with the protests, and that was a few men who had another beef and actually started shooting at each other that was separate than the protest. But you can feel people's anger. But tonight we haven't seen a lot of protesters hitting the streets. In fact, there's less than 6 people behind me outside the police department. Some have signs, but this is a lot different than what we saw Sunday night. Rapid gunfire followed by running and fear. You can see the panic rise in the crowd. The peaceful protest for Michael Brown turned to violence Sunday night. Ferguson's interim police chief, Andre Anderson, was in the middle of an interview when the anger just across the street boiled over.
We just want to be as patient as possible.
Message to those who are looting.
Get down.
Detectives rushed to surround 18-year-old Tyrone Harris. This video shows the moments just after police shot Harris from inside their unmarked vehicle after they say they were fired upon. Police say he was carrying a stolen gun.
It's a crime scene. Back up. Man, get him some help. Back up. Get him some help. Back up.
There were 4 officers who were in that van. All 4 fired at the suspect, and the suspect fell there.
Harris's aunt told CNN he wasn't carrying a gun and was running from the gunfire. As word of the shooting spread, the crowd's anger turned toward police.
We ready for what? We ready for war. We ready for war.
The shooting pushed police and protesters into a standoff. Someone started to throw bottles and bricks, and police fired back with tear gas and smoke bombs. 3 police officers were injured, 1 hit in the face by a brick. Monday afternoon, the city of Ferguson released a statement about the shooting. We are deeply disappointed with the violence that took place last night. This kind of behavior from those who want to cause disruption and destroy the progress from this last year will not be tolerated.
DOJ, do your job. DOJ, do your job.
But a year after Michael Brown was shot and killed by Officer Darren Wilson, tensions remain high. This afternoon, more than 50 protesters were arrested in downtown St. Louis. They were calling for the dismantling of the Ferguson Police Department. And with officials declaring a state of emergency in the county, there was frustration with the all too familiar scenes.
I think this is just another tragic reminder that weapons in an already wounded community is a recipe for disaster.
And Ryan, as you say in your report there, these scenes of shootings and clashes with protesters, they are becoming all the more common in the U.S. So what about the big picture? In the wake of the Michael Brown shooting last year, the Department of Justice did find that the courts and the police, where you are, exhibited this pattern and practice of discrimination against African Americans there. How is that being undone?
Well, you look, there's obviously a conversation that's going on within this community. They have had an election here, and we've seen a lot of officials change over. We've seen a changeover just from an all-white elected officials to having some African Americans a part of the electoral process here. But we're also seeing the court system here change. But there are people who say enough's enough. They want to see the police department go away. We did see protesters take to the highway just this afternoon, block the road, and you could see the frustrations because there were drivers who were no longer going to sit in their car and let people block the road. In fact, some of them just started driving through the crowd, and then you could see protesters kicking their car as they went through. So a lot of tension still remains here in this community.
Ryan Young joining us from Ferguson, Missouri. Ryan, thanks. And we do want to show you some recent images from Ferguson, Missouri, where even though some of the clashes have ended, you do see a large presence of people outside. And in the wake of Michael Brown from last year, I think people really feel the importance of having their cameras out, recording interactions with police, because what's underlying all of this is that distrust between police behavior and how communities of color feel like they are being treated. We're going to keep our eyes
and it has certainly renewed the conversation about police officers wearing body cameras as well, but of course safety is a top priority in that community. You remember a few months ago we saw buildings and offices burned down. Obviously a lot of people do not want a repeat of that, but the protesters started off very peaceful after Michael Brown was honored at 12:02 p.m. in the afternoon, marking the time he died, August 9th, 2014, and then all of a sudden last night turned violent. We heard gunshots.
One kind of isolated incident.
Right, gunshots ringing out, so we'll keep an eye on that story. And I should also mention we are working to get one of our reporters who's on the ground there in Ferguson, and we will bring him up as soon as we have him. All right, we want to update you on the situation in Ferguson. One of our reporters, Jason Carroll, is on the scene for us now. He joins us live. So, Jason, we saw gunshots in Ferguson last night. There have been arrests there tonight, as far as I understand. Set the scene for us now.
Several arrests, actually, Zane, that happened just about 45 minutes ago, right where we are. We are on a street called West Florissant, and if I can show you what we're experiencing out here right now, on one side of the street, you still have a number of protesters who are out here. On the other side of the street, you can see still a significant number of members of St. Louis County Police, as well as state troopers, trying to keep the peace. And for most of the night, that's what happened out here, actually. They were able to do that until, at a certain point, a small number of protesters went into the middle of the street. They repeatedly received warnings to get out of the street. When that didn't happen, that's when law enforcement moved in and made several arrests. Again, and there were some tense moments at that point. Some rocks and bottles were thrown. You can see from some of the tape, I think, that we were able to feed into you. You can see exactly what happened as officers moved in and made those arrests. And then shortly thereafter, the protesters went about doing what they set out here to do, which was talk about their anger. These people are angry. They feel as though in the years since Michael Brown's death, not enough has been done. They're looking for more change. They are not seeing that, and they're venting some of their frustration. Police will tell you that what you're seeing out here with these arrests are a small number of people who are out here not to protest their anger, but to cause problems. But what we're seeing out here is even a year after Michael Brown's death, there's still so much work that still needs to be done in this community. Zane?
And Jason, you just mentioned that people think that not enough change has happened, that they still don't like the way black men are treated by police officers in that community. But I'm just curious, from the people you've spoken to, what do people make of the small changes, the small sort of progress that's been made, especially when it comes to the hiring of more African Americans in the Ferguson Police Department?
I think for some people it's too little, too late, not enough. They're still looking for more. I think they're looking for more representation in the police department, not just in the police department, but also in the school board, throughout city government. And I think we saw what I think a lot of people would like to see is more interaction. They want police to listen to them. And I have to say, we did see some of that out here tonight. There was one community activist that was out here engaging with a member of the state police, talking to them, trying to sort out who might be in the crowd causing problems. So we did see some of that interaction. I think there are a number of people here in this community who would like to see more of that. But what is very clear to me, and I think to a number of people out here, is there's still a lot of a frustration, even a year later. But if you're going to be realistic about the situation here, you can't expect decades of ill feelings between this community and the police to be solved in 1 year. It's just simply going to take time. Zane?
Right, and of course, a few months ago, we saw a lot of violence, a lot of looting, a lot of burning. That community still hasn't been rebuilt from that point. So hopefully we don't see more unrest, especially violent unrest. Okay, Jason Carroll, live for us there in Ferguson. We appreciate that. Thank you.
And we'll, of course, update our viewers if there's more news out of Ferguson tonight. When we come back,
there is a small group of people out there that are intent on making sure that we don't have peace that prevails.
Sarah Seidner, CNN, Ferguson, Missouri.
Now we want to show you these live pictures coming into us out of Ferguson, Missouri. Keep in mind, it's just past midnight there. We've been watching during Sarah's report, and we saw, I think, a similar scene to what she described from yesterday and the day before. There were some clashes with police, some objects that appeared were thrown. One woman just a short time ago appeared to be struck in the face with some kind of canister that was thrown through the air. She was then
lying on the ground briefly.
And we do see a number of people that have been detained and cuffed, so there's potentially more arrests happening. But Zane, it speaks to the tensions that still exist and remain a full year from the deadly incident, and despite all of the federal government recommendations for change.
Yeah, police protesters there saying they want more significant changes. They've seen superficial changes, obviously. More African Americans have been hired in the police department in Ferguson, Missouri, but they want deeper changes. They want actual, real change between the relationship between young black men in that community and the police officers that deal with them on a daily basis. Of course, we're going to continue to monitor the situation here in Ferguson. We will bring you news as and when it happens, but we do want to go now to some other stories that we are following. I want to turn now to U.S. politics. Donald Trump, of course, he's in the headlines all the time.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.